Well, good morning, church. That was a wonderful introduction. When you said you brought in specialists, Marcia and I did sort of look to each other and like, they're talking about us. Look, we're going to do our best to share with you this morning as we navigate our way through blended and step families. I just want to make a special welcome also for those that are logged in online at home. Again, welcome, and we hope you enjoy the morning as well. I'm going to actually kick off this morning with a little bit of an exercise, okay? So there's no pressure in this. If you don't want to participate, that's okay. But if you do want to, we would welcome it. And it's simply just being able to raise your hand. So I'm actually going to ask you a number of questions, and if that relates to you, I'm just going to ask you to put your hand up, and I'm actually going to keep your hand up until we ask all of the rest of the questions. Okay? So the first question is, if you are currently a parent in a step or blended family, could you please raise, or have been, if you could please raise your hand? Yep. Okay. If you are a child or have experienced as a child a step or blended family, can I get you to raise your hand as well? Cool. If you have a sibling or a cousin, a family member that has been through or is in a step and blended family, can I get you to raise your hand as well? Okay, if you know someone who is in a step and blended family, can I get you to raise your hand? Okay, church, just have a look around and see how much this particular topic impacts us all. Okay, you can put your hands down. So this morning we are going to, it's going to be a bit of an interview style more than us just sort of up here speaking. So I'm going to interview my wife, Marcia. Not many people get the chance of being able to interview their wife, so this should be really fun. I'll put her under the spotlight.
Should be fun.
And I promise that I'll refer to my wife as Marcia. I'll try not to use any sort of lovey-dovey names that might happen at home. All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Excellent. Oops, I'll just get my little clicker out. Okay. So the first question, I'll just skip through, make sure this works. Excellent. So the first question, Marcia, you are a marriage and relationship counsellor.
I am.
So why do you do this work, and do you get danger pay?
I just really love the work that I do, working with couples and adults, individuals, young people in enriching their lives through their relationships. And one of the big things that really motivates me in that work is, just my understanding as a Christian, that relationships are fundamental to being human and to being a Christian, because we are essentially a relational self. We don't actually have a sense of self outside of relationship. Even when we were considered in the mind of God, it was through in the womb of the Trinity. We were all thought of in the womb of the Trinity, and then as we come into our human existence through the womb of our mother. So we never actually live or exist in isolation. We are in relationship, right from the very beginning, and there's a reason for that. That when God created us, He intentionally created us in His image. In Genesis, where the Trinity get together and they're sort of thinking about mankind and humankind and creating us, it's like, let us make them in our image. And what is the image of God? The image of God is shown to us as relationship, Father, Son and Holy Spirit in relationship. So to be in relationship is to actually reflect the very nature of God. So even in the tough sessions that I might have with couples that might be in conflict, or families that are navigating these issues, as complex as they can be, I know that this is actually really participating in what is very essential to us being made in the image of God, and I find it really redemptive, I find it really hopeful. When people have those aha moments of, we were made to be in community and relationship, and that how can we do this together, that's just gold, and it's a real privilege to be a part of that.
So you have a bit of a quote
Yes.
That you love.
One of my favourites. So over the years, through my studies, I've come across lots of authors that have given me inspiration and that have guided me and given me wisdom and insight. And Mary Piper, she's someone who's given me a lot of encouragement, both as a therapist and as a wife and mother. And she's written a beautiful book called The Shelter of Each Other. And this quote actually comes from that book. And she says about families, she says, families, whether biological, the ones we're born into, or chosen, the people that we choose to do life with, are what give most people's lives their shape. Most of our happiest and our most tragic experiences are somehow connected with family. Families are flawed, complex, intense, organic units whose members often fail each other in important ways. But family affection is the glue that holds lives together and gives lives its meaning. And whenever something happens to you, you want to share it. It's generally with someone in your family. And that quote really speaks to my heart and is a really big part of why I do what I do.
Yeah, that's great. So look, this slipping off my chair.
You've got the special chair.
So this next question is more of a personal one. So, we have journeyed through marriage, divorce, single parenting, remarriage, intentional step family.
We don't do boring.
We don't do boring. But it's had a big impact on your work. So what can you tell us about that?
So we've got a little picture there of our family. So this is our blended family, and just in case you're wondering whose kids belong to who, we've colour-coded them for you. So you can see that I brought to the mix 3 sons, and they range, and then Ian had his son. And so our children range in age from 21 to 13. At the time that we got together, they ranged in age from 14 to 17. So we've been married nearly 7 years.
14 to 7?
Yeah, December will be 7 years. And so you can see bits and pieces. We've got here, we've got grandparents. We've got in the background, they've got some of our siblings. You've got our pastor there who married us. You can see that in a blended family, it's a whole community that gets impacted. It's not just the family itself. There's our parents, there's our former in-laws, there's our siblings and our former in-laws, siblings-in-law, as well as our friends, our church community. Everyone's been a part of this journey, and that's been really significant. And for us, when it comes to what has been very important for our family is intentionality. I think Donna used that word really, and that really spoke to me. And that's been a very important word for us, is intentionality. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit more in our conversation today. Just about the choices that we have made to be a family. And I think that's something that's relevant to all family types is choice. But I think for a blended step family, that choice is so conscious. You make conscious choices to be a part of this sort of family type. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit today. So we've all of us, the boys included, have all made choices to be a part of our family.
Excellent, yes. And I 100% agree with that. And they're good-looking kids as well. So let's now talk about what's in the Bible around step and blended family. So is it a rare occurrence to have a step or blended family in the Bible?
Yeah, well, I think we can see that even just in our church community here today, step families are as ancient as the Bible and as common as yourself or your best friend. So we can see in the Bible, there's biblical examples. We've got a slide there of, Jesus was raised in a step family. Ruth and Boaz, who were the grandparents of King David, they are a step family. We have Hannah and Elkanah, who were the parents of the prophet Samuel. They were a step and blended family. I'm sure you can think of some others. There was Jacob and Rachel and Leah, and lots of, you look through the lineage of Christ, there's lots of examples of step families and blended families. And even here in our own community here today, it's everywhere. And recently I've been putting a book together, and I'm hoping to have it out and available in the new year. When I was first being approached and talking to publishers, I was saying, it's a bit nichey. This whole step family thing, blended family, it's a bit nichey. And really? Do you know anyone in your immediate circle that's gone through death or divorce, repartnered, brought together a family? Oh yeah, my best friend, my sister, my brother-in-law. So it's not niche, it's kind of everywhere. It's as ancient as the Bible and as common as your best friend.
Okay, so it's in the Bible. So what about society today? Do you have some kind of statistics that can actually sort of just give us a bit of an idea as to how prevalent that is?
Yeah, this is a really interesting snapshot of statistics in Australia 2017, so as recent as this year. We can see that the divorce rate is around 40%. In our community at large. That's actually an improvement on 10 years ago. So divorce has actually gone down in the last 10 years. Some other interesting trends have happened in that people are getting married later. The average age of marriage is around 31 now. And marriages are lasting on average longer, so that if people do go through divorce, they're married on average about 12 years, which is 2 years longer than 10 years ago. We also know that people bring to their marriages a great deal more expectation. So we want our spouse to be our best friend, our economic support, our spiritual advisor or comforter, counsellor, as well as our co-parent. It's a big order. We're expecting a lot from our marriages, our partnerships, and from our families. And then we talk about the kids. So we are finding in Australia at the moment that a third of children are spending a portion at least of their upbringing in a blended or a step family. It's actually, social researchers are actually now looking at step and blended families with a lot of interest and seeing it as a very fast growing family form and could potentially become even a dominant family form in years to come. So it's a very pertinent topic for us as a Christian, as a body of Christ, to be actually looking at this, because it's actually really a growing area in our Australian community.
And look, it's probably a good time to actually just say, to the leaders of the church here, it's fantastic that you're actually including this as part of the series, because it needs to be discussed.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, so I guess, already this morning we've used a number of different terms. We've used step, we've used blended, and I'm sure there's some other names as well. So when people, do go through divorce and remarriage and, that step blended, what's in a word?
Yeah.
Is it important?
Yeah, it actually really is. I just want to see, you might chuck a couple of images up there. What are some ideas that come to your mind, just to yourself, when you think of the word step family? What concepts come to your mind? What images come to your mind? When you think of the word blended family, what images, thoughts are conjured up in your mind around that? Some other terms that are currently getting a bit of traction is multi-household families or combined families, to sort of reflect the dual, at least like two households that children or adults might be going between. What feelings do you have when you hear those terms? There can be a whole lot of thoughts and feelings that come up for people when they hear those terms. Some of those are positive, some of those are negative. I actually find too in my work that some people reject all of those terms and will say, we're just a family. Some people will say to me, we're a dysfunctional family. And I'll say, explain dysfunctional family to me. We've been through divorce and remarriage. We're like a blended step family. I was like, so how is that dysfunctional? And there's this sense, I find a lot of people carry this sense of shame. We've veered from what might be considered an ideal. But I actually really challenge that view and say, how could being a blended family actually be about hope and maybe a solution to what were some really overwhelming challenges? When we think from the technical perspective, if we're looking sort of in social policy and social research, technically speaking, a step family is what Ian and I would have, is where a couple have children from a previous relationship, or at least one of the partners has a child from the previous relationship, and they bring the children and the adults come together. And generally they don't have a child, they don't have an ours baby. Where an ours baby comes in, so where the new couple actually have a child together, that is technically referred to as a blended family. So some people are very particular about those words. Some people use the words interchangeably, but there is a distinction, just so that you know, sort of let you in on the nerdy research or the nerdy social science. There is a distinction between terms. And there's some more terms, as I mentioned, about combined family, multi-household family, that are also starting to come into the research and the conversation.
So I know in our own personal circumstance, you know, when it came to you and I talking about sort of step or blended family, you know, we weren't too hung up, I guess, on the titles. But we were pretty intentional when it came to the kids and what they actually called us.
Yes.
So you know, we were very much, you know, to Marcia's kids, they just call me Ian. They don't have that pressure of having to feel like they've got to call me step something, stepdad, and vice versa with my son. So that was something intentional, you know, that we actually brought in to our marriage. One other thing, just when we're talking about in a word, and we've talked about step and blended, does foster, how does foster parents and foster family actually potentially fit into this as well?
That's actually been a really interesting part of my research, is that when I do give a talk on step families, or sometimes I do a bit of sessional lecturing at university on family and relationships, I'll throw some information up there on blended families, step families, and I'll invariably have foster or kinship carers say to me, that describes our family. We relate to that. We actually need that conversation happening because that's what we relate to as well. And I think it's those permeable boundaries, like step families, blended families, have boundaries in which family members come and go. And so that often relates a lot to the foster family situation as well.
Yeah, great. So I guess the next question is, to blend or not to blend?
That is the question. It is the question.
So can you just talk us through, you know, a little bit around the intention of that?
Yeah. There is a great deal of pressure on blended families to blend, and what that actually might mean. People can feel a sense of failure of, oh, we're not blending, you know, we're not close, we're not, you know, united on everything. And I'll often say, but what family is all the time? You know, even families that haven't been through a divorce or a death of a parent are not always close and aren't always, you know, in total agreement and united on everything. That's normal, that's human beings. So what I often, you know, when we talk about blending, there's actually in the research about 30% of blended families who don't actually sort of ever get to a point of feeling really close and united, yet they can still perform the family task of getting kids to school, paying the bills, you know, looking after everybody. So I actually often say to blended families, just let go of that ideal that we must. If it happens, fabulous. But, you know, it's okay. There's actually a third of blended families that won't ever feel that real sense of... It could be to do with the age of the kids at the time that you get together. You know, you might have one of you has older kids and one of you has younger kids, or both of you have older children, or, you know, in the adolescence and about to launch. So the kids aren't actually spending a lot of time growing up together. Or one of you didn't bring children to the relationship as well. So, you know, it takes a long time to sort of get to that place of connection and feeling blended, and it might happen later on. There's no need for it to happen immediately. So I really, and particularly that whole idea of, you know, we've got to love each other, we've got to feel that sense of love, or I've got to love my stepkids the same way I love my biological children, or, you know, I've got to love, you know, my step-parent the way I love my biological parent. That's just not real. It's just not real. It's different buckets of love. There's no competition. You will have different basis of connection. So in a family that we call it a first family is a family that hasn't gone through death or divorce in the couple relationship. So in a first family, I've just lost my train of thought there. What was I? I was talking about blended.
Yeah.
Oh, the respect, yeah. So in a first family, the basis, the foundation is biology and history. So everyone's related, we've got the same blood type, we're all related, and we've got history. We've incrementally gone through, the first tooth, the first day at school, the first day walking, gone through all those firsts together, and so we've shared history. In a blended family, you don't have that. That sort of happened in another setting, and you're sort of coming together at a different point of development. So actually use respect. Respect is something that is common across. So I should say, don't make love your foundation to start with, make it respect. Aim for respect first, and then love can grow. If there's an environment of respect and trust, so even terms like so for our children, I know that sometimes there was a sense of concern about, what is this relationship that I have with my step-parent? And so we actually use the metaphor or the analogy of like an auntie or an uncle. You might have similar feelings to your stepdad or your stepmum, similar to what you have to your aunties or your uncles. And you can be close, emotionally close to an auntie or an uncle, or you can be distant, but you still respect them as adult leaders in your family. So sort of having a similar position. So you have respect for the existence, the inclusion of everyone, and love can grow in that environment, but it can take time. It takes the pressure right out of the whole equation.
And because there is a whole heap of pressure.
Yeah.
At the very start, especially as you're bringing two families together, that often the parents sort of shoulder and wear, don't they? So,
and anxiety, and the kids too. There's anxiety. It's often sitting under the table. It's just hovering there unspoken. There's a sense of anxiety. There's a sense of pressure. And so often I just see shoulders drop, like, breathe a sigh of relief. We can just take that layer of pressure right out of the picture. Because we can do respect. If we can respect our work colleagues, or we can respect our neighbours, or we can respect the people that we go to church with, we can at least start there. And love can grow.
So we've often talked, I guess, just how different the process has been from first marriages, raising kids, going through divorce, remarriage, step-family. Just the process is so much more, I guess, complex as we look at it. So can you sort of unpack, I guess, the differences of the processes?
Well, let's have a look at, say, what a first family, if we look at, say, the stages of development. So all of us in our families, we go through different stages of development. And so we start off as a single adult. We find someone that we fancy, and there's a courtship phase, and then we kind of go, okay, let's get married, and we get married. And so, those parents of those young adults release their child and, with fear and trepidation, entrust them with their life to get married. And then that couple might have children, and then they might have a couple of kids, and those kids, then their family's completed, and they've got teenagers. And then those teenagers grow up into young adulthood, and they launch as well. And then the couple is sort of back to being a couple again, and then into that later stage of life. So that's sort of the typical process that most families go through who've been in a first family cycle. That's sort of the stages of development, as you were. It's a little bit different in step families. So it looks a little bit more like this. Oh dear.
We had a few of those moments, didn't we?
And so the fantasy stage is sort of where the couple who have maybe been through an experience of loss, and the whole family has actually been through an experience of loss, whether it's been through death or divorce. And now this new couple's found each other, and there's this sense of love will conquer all. We're going to be one big happy family. This is awesome. We're all going to love each other. The kids are going to love each other the way we love each other. We're always going to love each other the way we love each other. What could go wrong? And then invariably, as life would have it, we realise actually we're not same, we're different. And your family's weird. And then the other person going, no, your family's weird. And this is not working. And it's often, really interestingly, the mother in the family, whether she's the biological mother or the stepmother, sort of is the first one to sort of go, oh, something's iffy. I'm not sure what it is. It's not that stepdads or the father in the family isn't as aware, but maybe it's the culture, the conditioning of us as women being a little bit more relationally conditioned in our upbringing. We'll just kind of get a sense of that. It's often in that immersion phase that gives rise to the whole wicked stepmother sort of archetype, as you were, because she's sort of going, something's not right. And she's feeling a bit off, and she might get a bit angry and frustrated and resentful or feeling invisible in that phase. So just to be aware of that, if there's some of that development happening, maybe this family is in that immersion phase. And then the awareness phase is, okay, we are really different. This is often when couples come and see me. Where there's starting to be a real clarity around you're different, you've got a different history, you've had a different stage of development to me, I don't know. And then they get into mobility phase, which is, now we're in conflict. And when so awareness and mobility phase is often when people come and see me and I go, fantastic, your family's working. You're right on cue. And they go, what? We're fighting, we're not getting along. I said, oh, you're right on cue, you're right in the mobility phase. Now, this is often when we talk about, I didn't mention it earlier, but the 60 to 65% divorce rate for second marriages often occurs around the awareness and mobility phase. It's right in the middle of this difference because people go, oh, I thought this was going to work, but we're just too different. It's just, I just don't know if this can work. And so for me to sort of say, oh, no, you're right on cue, this is working, they're like, huh, you're talking a different language. But it's actually that you're moving nicely through the stages of family development. If you can get through, this is a really important time to really call in the reinforcements, to call in help, because if you can stay the course, there's good stuff on the other end. So once we start to get into a space of, okay, problem solving, which is the action stage of, we're not going to eliminate differences, but we're actually going to find a way to start making intentional choices together to work through those differences. And we start to pool our resources and start to, who can we call on? Is it our church community? Is it our family and friends? Is it, even, there's social workers at Centrelink or, different, we call in the resources, our parents, our siblings, our, people who can walk and journey with us through this stage. This is all a part of the action phase. Then we get to a contact phase. It's like, Houston, we have contact. It's like, relief, second honeymoon. We're doing this, we can do this. And then resolution, which is a sense of stability. And who knows, in family life, it's never stable too long. Doesn't matter what your family type is. We're never locked and loaded. We just cycle through this. But this is a really important, awareness. And this is often what kinship carers and foster families say to me, we relate to this. This is what we relate to because this has been our experience. And so what you need to understand in this is that grief and loss is often the energy that's moving people through this stage of development, these different stages, because we're kind of going, oh, at the kids' first day at school or at their last day of school, in our mind we had this vision it would be a certain way and it's not. It's a different picture. And that doesn't mean that that's a bad picture, it's just a different picture and it invariably gives rise to feelings of grief and loss. And that's for the kids and for the parents. It's really important to understand that kids' grief is really different to adult grief. Kids will have a need to hold on to their history, to hold on to that ideal image, to hold on to that sense of connection with their biological parent. Whereas adults often have a need to let go of certain things in order to move on. So children and parents' grief is often very different. And children will often act out their grief in their behaviours. Actually, so do adults. It's just that sometimes we've got a few more words, a bit more vocabulary to go along with that. But if you can be really conscious of that's the energy. But if you can work through the grief and loss and actually invite it, this is actually an opportunity to heal. This is an actually opportunity to heal. The grief has come up so we can heal something here. Then you can move through to the next stage.
Okay, and we'll cover off a bit of grief and loss soon.
Yeah.
But you talked just before there about there's some good news.
Oh, there's some great
when
news.
You can actually get through this.
Yeah, there's some great news. So Stepfamilies, blended families are the most vulnerable to breaking down in the first 5 years. So that slide before, that process for a stepfamily cycle of stages of development takes on average between 4 to 12 years. So we're talking years, a lot of time. And the most vulnerable point to breakdown is in the first 5 years. So if you get through the first 5 years as a blended family, well done, go you. Because the divorce rate drops from 65 to 20%. Couples who make it through the first 5 years actually go on to enjoy an 80% success rate in their marriages. And that's backed up by research. So if you've got to year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, I'm not saying your marriage won't, you know, no marriage is immune to troubles, but you're in a good space. You've done really well. You know, celebrate that victory. Celebrate that point that you've got to, and to know that there's actually some really good stuff on the other side.
Okay, so I've heard you talk a lot about grief and loss, and you just sort of talked about some then. But in a step-blended family situation, and it's been a real issue in our own family. Can you just talk us through a little bit more about, you know, I guess what we can see with that, what we can expect and what we need to do?
Yeah, I think just to normalise that grief and loss is going to be there. Grief and loss also exists in first family life cycles too, like when the child gets married or when there's a baby, or, you know, it's a celebratory time, but it's also the ending of one thing and the beginning of a new thing. Arrivals and departures are big events in families, but grief and loss is very intense in a blended family situation. So just normalise that. Normalise the fact that adults have different needs, kids have different needs, and you might actually need to bring in someone like myself or a child counsellor, or you might even need both. You might need to have a couple of sessions in family therapy so we can make this talkable. I often say to couples and families, that which isn't spoken becomes unspeakable. So if you can make it, bring it to words and make it a conversation, you can solve problems. Problems that are talked about are solvable problems. So just normalising those issues is really important, and normalising the grief and loss. It's okay to feel those feelings. And grief and loss feelings are feelings like jealousy. That's a grief and loss feeling. Guilt, anger, sadness, depression. This doesn't mean you've got a clinical disorder, doesn't mean you've got a mental health condition. You're actually having a human response. You're having an emotional response to something that's real, that's proportionate. So just naming it, giving it language, validating it, normalising it. It's normal to feel those feelings. But you won't be stuck there. You can actually move through those feelings. And normalising that means you've got a much better chance of moving through those stages and on to the next stage.
So one of the ones that you have there is around role clarity. And I thought I'd just quickly share a story. So one of the boys, and this was like when they were younger. I think it was on my birthday actually.
He was.
Not that I'm bitter about that or anything.
No. He's having one of his moments.
He was having one of his moments, and we call it a meltdown. And I guess, you know, some of the things that he was saying and doing, and, you know, we had a lot of people over. You were trying to sort of, you know.
Don't you love that when it's public?
Yes, you were trying to sort of settle him down, and I just sort of felt like I needed to go and sort of back you up a little bit. And the reaction I got was, "You're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do." And it was kind of like...
He's heard that one.
Yes. It's like, well, duh. Maybe not my finest moment of response.
I think it's actually a good one.
But I actually, you know, went on to explain to him that actually it wasn't about me being his dad. It was actually about the way he was behaving and talking to you as my wife, and as a sort of leader of the family. That actually was unacceptable. And from that moment forward, things really shifted.
It really did.
In our relationship.
It really did. And it actually built respect. It built respect. It took some of the grief, it made it conscious, and it took some of the, like, I can absorb that. I know I'm not your real dad. That's an issue, but that's not the issue here. The issue here is about respect. And we can acknowledge the grief, but still come back to our baseline of respect. So it was actually a really important clarifying moment.
So roles are important. So how can people develop close relationships in a step and blended family? Talk us through that process.
This is often when people come and see me and they go, my kids aren't accepting my new partner, or, the kids aren't being, respectful to me. And I kind of go, okay, let's unload the tasks. Let's unload this. Family bonding happens in first families incrementally. It happens over time. It happens in a million ways over, lots and lots of moments. It doesn't happen all in one go. We need to separate the tasks and sort of make them conscious. So what I say to couples is you need to, because of the grief in the sense of everyone in the family has gone through some kind of loss, whether it's the loss of a parent or through death or divorce, there's been a loss. We need to make that normal, and then we need to reassure the biological bonds first. So kids need a lot of reassurance. They need to sort of know, you're still my dad, you're still my mum, we're still close. Even though you have a new partner, or there's these new kids, or we've got these new, grandparents, aunties, uncles, we're still okay, as parent and child, we're still close. Kids really need that reassurance. They might need one-on-one time. I really encourage that. The couple relationship is pivotal to the success of the family, and it's also the weakest link. So you need to really invest time, but do it separately. So we're not actually trying to make the step parent and the biological kids close straight away. Let's just leave that a little bit to time. Biological parent and biological kids need to really firm up and reassure their relationship with each other, and sort of concurrently but separately, the husband and wife or the couple need to really shore up their relationship. So those two things are happening at the same time but separately. And then over time, as the steps, the step kids and the step parent get to know each other, they build trust and respect, you can start to weave these things in. You can start to weave these relationships together. And then the whole family can start to operate together. That, again, takes about 4 to 7 years, that process. It takes time. And I really encourage you as a couple to really invest the time into your relationship. Your relationship is pivotal.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So one of the things that we found really important in our marriage and in our family is that big word, forgiveness.
Yeah.
Why is that so important in a blended step family?
Yeah, I think, first of all, God doesn't expect us to be perfect. The jig is up. We're not perfect. God is not shocked by our mistakes. So being open and transparent with God and just running to him, King David says in the Psalms, I pour out my soul like water. He was a man after God's own heart, not because he was perfect, but because he had a transparent heart. He owned his mistakes and he went and just ran to God and found forgiveness and grace there. And we can do that. We can come boldly to God. We can forgive ourselves for not living up to the ideals that we had in the fantasy stage, that we were going to be the perfect parent or the perfect kid, or we were going to have the perfect family. We can forgive ourselves because no family is perfect. It's got us in it, so it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be. We can also acknowledge that we've come together because we've experienced hurts and wounds. Now, some of those may have been intentional. There may have been betrayal. There may have been broken trust. There may have been unintentional hurts and wounds where, there was a sense of abandonment that wasn't intended. So we need to forgive and to find forgiveness. But I think if we have found forgiveness first, we can extend that. I think forgiveness is a really important reset button because it's where we take our sense of offence, our sense of hurt and our sense of woundedness, and we hand it over to God. And we say, God, this hurts. This matters. This was wrong. This affected me. This is the impact this has had on my life. And I need you to come and heal me. I need your restorative justice process. I'm not going to take revenge. I'm not going to try to level the playing field here. I'm not going to try and make the other person feel like I feel. It's kind of, we're taking that whole sting out of the situation, and we're trusting God. We're trusting that he has got this in hand. It's really important for me to sort of say that forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same things. Sometimes as a church community, we can put forgiveness and reconciliation together automatically, But that's not always possible this side of heaven. Forgiveness is it's the vertical. God and me, I open up my heart to God, I give him room to move, I hand over the hurt and I allow his grace and healing into me. If two people have done that, then there's a possibility that they can sit down and decide we can have a new relationship and we can work that out together. But two people need to have done that process, but that's a choice, and sometimes that doesn't always happen. That doesn't mean forgiveness hasn't happened. It just means that forgiveness has happened, reconciliation may or may not happen. This side of heaven, reconciliation may not be a possibility. That doesn't mean forgiveness hasn't happened. So just to really unload those concepts. And then by coming back to forgiveness as a reset button, it's like we can have a new beginning. You know, that is the miracle of forgiveness, is that we can start again. And so forgiveness is important in all our relationships, but it's really important in a blended family.
So given all the issues, and just very quickly, you know, what from a support purpose what are some of the key things when supporting people through this are important to help them?
Yeah. Well, I think the first place I always start with is the couple. You know, I've got an image up there of a wheel. So if you see in the middle of the wheel, there's a hub. And in the hub of that wheel, that's the couple relationship. So the centre of a wheel must be centred. Now, if you think of a bicycle tyre, if the hub of the wheel is wobbly, the bike's going to fall over. The hub of the wheel is the couple relationship, and every other relationship radiates out of the hub of the wheel. So it's okay to prioritise your relationship. You're not being selfish, you're not taking resources away from the rest of the family. In fact, you are giving health to the rest of the family. So if the centre is centred, then the whole family finds its place. Every other relationship finds its safety and sense of purpose and direction. So spending time together as a couple is really good. And recognising that time is your friend. You know, take the pressure off that we've got to have this all locked and loaded. You know, time is your friend. As we know, I've said it today, we're looking at a year's process. A process that takes years. So time is your friend, time's on your side. So you don't have to have it all together. You know, we're in the messy middle of it. You know, but that's life, isn't it? You know, we never have it all sorted all at once. So we can work with time. It's also what we do in the time. So what you do in the time doesn't heal all wounds. Just look at your belly button. That's a wound. It will never go away. It's a reminder that you are connected to somebody. We will have wounds in life. That's okay. But it's what we do in time that makes the difference. So time doesn't make things go away. Emotions don't wear a watch. They don't go, oh, that happened 30 years ago. That doesn't matter. Emotions don't wear a watch. It's what you do in the 30 years. Have you made intentional choices? Have you decided to work through a forgiveness process, both of yourself, of others? Have you received forgiveness from God? Have you been able to receive other people's forgiveness? It's the stuff that we do in the time that makes the difference.
Yep. So what about from a church community point of view? How can we all be supporting people that are going through blended step families?
Well, I think this is just, I'm so excited that we're here and so honoured and privileged to be here, that as a church community we can have a whole of church conversation about these things. So we're making something that's often been a very a secret or even a shame thing. You know, recently, are you familiar with the Insight program on SBS? Jenny Brock is the compere there, and they put a call out recently to do a show on Stepfamilies. It was on their Facebook page, it was on their website. And a whole heap of people responded and said, yeah, sure, I'll go on so long as you block out my face and change my voice. There's a whole lot of sense of danger, secrecy, intensity. I don't know what to do with that. So as a church, just talking about it makes it huge. Having a sense of empathy, responding with empathy, I want to understand what this is like for you. Tell me about your family. How does it work? How does it operate? Don't assume that you know. Don't think because you watch the Brady Bunch or Modern Family that you know. Mind you, I kind of like Modern Family. I kind of go, oh, wow, I feel better. That's all. But yeah, isn't it good that we have these images in our community now? So we can do this in our church community as well. You know, we can make it relatable. Having people like Ian and I come up and talk, you can sort of go, oh, people are doing it, and you know, we're relatively sane and normal. You know, relatively.
We hope.
We hope. But I think having examples that are relatable, and just make it normal to talk about. Emphasise respect. You know, using that as a baseline. Being intentional in your language. So listen, when you're listening to a family talk about their family life and how they do stuff, respond with like terms. So ask them, so what does that mean when you have the kids? What is it like for your family? So what is it like on the weeks that you don't have the kids? So do you have all the kids all at the same time? How does that change? So be curious. Ask, but not in an interrogative kind of way or a what, why, like be empathic. So what would it be like if someone else was asking me about my family? Be sensitive. And this is not the end of their story. So if someone is saying to you, oh, it's just, you know, they might be in the mobility phase or the awareness phase, and they say, oh, this is tough. This is really tough, and I don't know if we're going to make it. You can say, you know, this is not the end of your story. You know, I've heard that this might actually just be a stage, and you're in a tough stage. And the research actually says this is a tough stage. I can validate that because I've spent some time learning about it. This is not the end of your story. This is a stage. It's not the end of the story. There could actually be some really good stuff on the other side. Tell me about it. Let's see if we can go through this together. Let's see if we can journey through this together as a church community.
Yeah, good. So very conscious of time.
Yeah.
You've got one slide to kind of wrap it up with a heap of tips.
Yeah. So this is my MacGyver slide. Choose your own adventure. So I love the analogy of a Swiss Army knife because it's light, it's portable, it's in your pocket, yet it does multiple things. It can, cut toenails and open wine bottles and, create a bomb and all the things that MacGyver does, with a paperclip. That's often the sort of stuff that a Stepfamily is doing. They're doing a lot with a little. They're doing a lot of stuff with a few resources. So I often say to a Stepfamily, choose your own adventure. Act like MacGyver. Be creative, be flexible, be dynamic in your thinking. So promote flexibility. Help a Stepfamily be creative in the ways that they work through their problems. I often say to a blended family, you guys are dynamic problem solvers. You could broker world peace. The skills that you're developing, the strengths that you've shown, the courage in the face of adversity, that's awesome. Acknowledge that, validate those strengths, look for the good, build it up, do more of that. How does stuff work? Do more of that. Normalise the challenges. There will be challenges, normalise those. Extend your connections. So how can you connect with other families? How can you connect in our church family? So you're not feeling so alone. Create traditions, like traditions that actually are meaningful to you as a new family. We have a Sunday afternoon tradition of when all the kids come back. For us, Sunday is the coming back together. Friday is the going to different homes. Sunday is the coming back together to our home. We have a barbecue dinner. It's a light, easy dinner. I'll often be folding 3 loads of washing, and we'll do a light, easy dinner. But that's sort of our ritual. It's a ritual of coming back together, but we make it an easy dinner. So families have different rituals, so create those new traditions as a family that help you bond.
Awesome. Yeah. So, look, I hope that was helpful to hear that discussion today. And as we close, I'll probably just ask the band to come up, and just as I finish up. Marcia and I are still going through this journey, and we'll continue to go through this journey. There's been some amazing blessings that have come from being in a step family, and we continue to see that.
It's a grace journey.
Yeah, absolutely, on a daily basis. Has it been without trials? No. We've had some pretty dark and hard moments that we've had to really work through as a couple, as a family. And I guess we've intentionally built our family, not just on our own strength, but on Jesus as the cornerstone of our family. And I'm just going to quickly read that verses out. So, now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family. Together we are his house, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, and the cornerstone is Christ Jesus himself. We are carefully joined together in him, becoming a holy temple for the Lord. Through him, you Gentiles are also being made part of this dwelling where God lives by his Spirit. I really like that verse, and whilst it's about sort of the Gentiles and Jews and sort of saying, hey, we're all one in Christ, I guess there's a couple of intentional things from a step and blended family that we've done, and that is that Jesus is our cornerstone of our family, and that means putting our absolute complete trust in him. Our everything that we do as a family is in him. And that, if you look back to those ancient times when they were building those homes, or whatever they were called, the homes, the buildings, the cornerstone was often the biggest stone. It was the foundation. It created a sure foundation. And as followers of Christ, when we actually have him as our sure foundation, our families will be built on a strong foundation. It doesn't mean that it's not without its troubles, but we've always got someone that is actually guiding and leading our path on that journey. I think the second point to that is the rest of the stones are us. We are the body of Christ, and as a church, and we actually form that building. We come together, and I kind of liken the mortar nearly as the stickiness. It's actually how, as a church, we respond. It's how we encourage each other. So for people that are in blended and step families, and if you're part of this congregation and you know people that are going through that, it's actually how you can show God's grace, God's love in all of those situations, and how you can share and encourage those people. I actually want to give a chance now for anyone that may be in a step or blended family or foster family that might be doing it tough. Maybe there was some shame stuff that Marcia talked about as well, that has, maybe you just haven't had a chance to be able to release that. And you actually just need a time now to be able to just kind of say to God, you know what, you are my sure foundation. We're going to rest in you, and just to be able to have some people come around and actually pray with you. So I want to give that opportunity now. Like, if you're in that situation, I know it can be difficult sometimes, but look, I encourage you. I know for Marcia and I wish we had that opportunity in our church to be able to kind of go forward at the time, we were going through this, to be able to have people just come around us and pray for us. So if that's you, and if you're by yourself here, and that's a daunting task, bring someone with you, bring a friend. That's okay. But if you'd like to come now, I just ask you to come forward, and we'll just have a couple of people pray, and then we'll finish with a song for this morning. So if that's you, please come forward, and we'll quickly pray.